So what if I told you that the standard medical treatment given to literally millions of type 2 diabetics every single day isn't actually curing their disease? Like, it's mathematically and biologically guaranteed to make the underlying problem worse.
Yeah, it is an incredibly sobering thought. I mean, when you look at the sheer scale of the global diabetes epidemic, it's a thought that forces us to re-examine almost everything we thought we knew about metabolic health.
Right. And I want you to picture this, whether you're listening in your car or making dinner or out on a walk, you or maybe a parent or a friend go to the doctor for just an annual checkup.
Happens every day.
Exactly. And the blood work comes back, and the doctor walks in holding that dreaded clipboard, right? And they give you this sympathetic look and say, your blood sugar's too high, you have type 2
Right, the
diabetes.
classic diagnosis moment.
Yeah. And then they write a prescription for a medication to lower that blood sugar, hand it to you, and send you on your way. And I mean, on the surface, it seems entirely logical. High blood sugar is bad, this pill lowers the blood sugar, therefore the pill is good, and the problem is solved.
Well, yeah, it appeals to our desire for quick, measurable fixes. I mean, you identify a rogue metric on a lab report, you apply a chemical intervention, and you force that metric back into a socially acceptable range. From a purely administrative standpoint, it looks like a total success.
Right, right. But today we are going to look at why that perfectly standard, everyday medical interaction might be treating the smoke while completely ignoring the fire that's, actively burning down the house.
I like that analogy.
Thanks. We are pulling from a really fascinating, honestly paradigm-shifting book today called The Diabetes Code by Dr. Jason Fung.
It's a brilliant text.
It really is.
Yeah.
He essentially looks at the last 50 years of how the medical establishment has treated type 2 diabetes and argues that we have just been fighting the absolute wrong enemy this entire time.
Yeah, he completely challenges the absolute bedrock of traditional endocrinology. I mean, the core premise we are dissecting today is his argument that type 2 diabetes is not fundamentally a high blood sugar disease.
Which is wild to hear.
It is,
Yeah.
because we've always been told it is. But high blood sugar is just a symptom. The actual disease, the root cause, is insulin resistance, which is driven by chronically dangerously high levels of insulin in the body.
Okay, so my goal today is to act as a proxy for everyone listening. I want to really understand this new way of looking at metabolism. We're going to explore the literal nuts and bolts of this crisis, the specific foods that trigger it and the methods for potentially reversing it.
It's going to be quite the journey.
It is, but I want to make sure we don't drown in medical jargon here. If we start throwing around terms like endocrinology and glycogen, you have to promise to slow me down and just explain the actual mechanics.
Oh, absolutely. That is exactly what I am here for. We need to look at the causality, right? The why behind the what.
Right.
Because when you understand the biological mechanics of how your body processes energy, I mean, this disease stops looking like some mysterious genetic curse that randomly strikes people.
Which is how a lot of people feel, I think.
Exactly. But it starts looking like a highly predictable biological reaction to a very specific environment.
Okay, I love that. Let's start by zooming out a bit. To understand why Dr. Fung is arguing so passionately for a total overhaul of our treatment approach, I feel like we first need to understand the scale of the failure, because the current approach is failing, isn't it?
Failing is almost an understatement, honestly. If you track the epidemiological data over the last 30 to 40 years, the rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity have just skyrocketed globally.
It's everywhere now.
It is. And this rise mirrors the globalization of modern, highly processed food systems. I mean, we went from this being a relatively rare condition, mostly seen in older populations, to a global health crisis that is now routinely diagnosed in teenagers and even children.
Which is terrifying. And the traditional medical response to this explosion has basically been to prescribe more drugs to lower blood sugar. Right.
Historically, yes, that's been the playbook. The clinical focus has been intensely singular, manage the glycemic load. If blood sugar is high, administer a drug.
And the drug pushes the blood sugar down.
Right. And then the lab numbers look better, the doctor is happy. But if you follow these patients over a decade, a tragic flaw emerges in that treatment loop.
The disease keeps progressing.
It inevitably progresses. The patients aren't actually healing. I mean, they might have better blood test numbers for a few months or, a few years, but eventually the initial dose of the medication stops working.
Because their body just gets used to it.
Essentially, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The underlying resistance gets stronger, so the doctor increases the dose. When that stops working, they add a second medication from a completely different drug class.
Wow.
Then a third. And eventually, they are prescribed direct insulin injections. And despite all of that aggressive chemical intervention to keep the blood sugar down, the patients still develop the classic horrific complications of diabetes.
So mechanically, what does that actually tell us? Because if I take a Tylenol for a fever caused by like a massive bacterial infection, my fever goes down. But if I don't take antibiotics, the bacteria just keep multiplying.
Right.
Are we basically just giving out metabolic Tylenol?
That's a very apt comparison.
Yeah.
Managing the symptom does not arrest the underlying pathology. The disease progresses because the root cause, the mechanism generating the high blood sugar in the first place, is completely ignored.
This brings to mind an analogy Dr. Fung uses in the book that really, really made this click for me.
A sink analogy.
Yes.
Yeah.
The overflowing sink. I want you to imagine you walk into your kitchen and your sink is just overflowing. Water is cascading over the edges. It's flooding the countertops, ruining the cabinets, and pouring onto your hardwood floors.
A total disaster.
Complete disaster. And the tap is on full blast. Traditional medicine in this scenario is like a plumber who rushes in, completely ignores the tap, and just starts frantically mopping the floor.
And when the first mop gets totally saturated and the floor is still wet, what does the plumber do?
They write a prescription for a bigger mop.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
bring in more medication. We keep mopping up the blood sugar from the bloodstream. But the fundamental argument of the diabetes code is that, hey, someone needs to reach over and turn off the tap.
Right. Let's pull on that thread for a second, because if we are just mopping up the sugar, if we are using medications, and specifically insulin, to force the excess sugar out of the blood, where exactly is it going? I mean, it doesn't just evaporate.
It certainly does not evaporate, no. And this is where Fung's shift in perspective becomes quite radical for a lot of people.
Okay, I'm ready.
When a doctor prescribes insulin to a type 2 diabetic, that insulin acts as a hormonal signal. It tells the body to take the circulating sugar out of the bloodstream and just pack it away into the cells of the body.
And when that happens, the blood sugar numbers on the lab report drop.
Exactly. The doctor is happy, the patient is relieved, the floor looks dry, to use your analogy.
But the sink is still overflowing, so if the sugar isn't in the blood anymore, it's just being shoved into my organs.
Precisely. It is being forcefully packed into your liver, your kidneys, your heart, your eyes, your internal tissue.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this is the inherent danger of forcing more sugar into cells using extra insulin. You are actively worsening the underlying metabolic state. You are literally cramming toxic levels of glucose into organs that are already desperately full just to make a blood test look normal.
That is absolutely terrifying. We are treating this progressive, destructive decline as an inevitable tragedy, but Fung is reframing it as a completely logical physiological response.
It is a response to an environmental trigger. I mean, if you leave the tap on full blast, constantly flooding the body with excess energy, the body's going to react. It's not a mysterious failure of your biology.
Right. And if you're listening to this, I hope you realize how empowering that distinction actually is.
It really is.
It reframes type 2 diabetes completely. It isn't an uncontrollable curse that you just have to manage as your health slowly deteriorates. It is a condition that is deeply understandable.
Because it's driven by environmental inputs, yeah.
Exactly. And because of that, it's heavily influenced by your lifestyle. It gives you the agency back.
Once you understand the mechanism, you have the power to change the inputs.
Okay, so if we are treating the wrong problem by just mopping the floor, we need to look at the actual problem happening inside the body's machinery.
Let's do it.
But before we get to the cellular level, I think I need you to clear something up for me first. I've always been a bit confused by the naming conventions, honestly.
You're definitely not alone in that.
Type 1 and type 2 diabetes, are they just like different severities of the exact same disease?
It is a super common point of confusion, and frankly, the medical terminology does us a huge disservice here.
Okay, how so?
Well, they share a symptom, chronically high blood sugar. But mechanically, biologically, they are entirely different universes. Calling them both diabetes is like calling a car crash and a collapsed bridge the exact same thing, because they both result in blocked traffic.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's break them down. Let's start with type 1.
Sure. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. For reasons that medical science is still, untangling, likely a mix of genetics and environmental triggers, the body's immune system makes a catastrophic error.
It attacks itself.
Right. It goes rogue and attacks the pancreas, specifically the beta cells, which are the biological factories that produce insulin.
So the immune system essentially just burns down the factory.
Yes. A person with type 1 diabetes produces zero or practically zero insulin. They have an absolute total deficiency.
Oh, okay.
And without insulin, their cells cannot absorb energy from the food they eat.
Oh.
They could consume 10,000 calories a day, but without insulin to shuttle that energy into the cells, they would literally starve to death on a cellular level.
That's horrifying. So that is why they must inject exogenous insulin just to survive.
Exactly. But type 2 is completely different.
Okay, I was trying to visualize this before we started, and I wonder if a lock and key metaphor works here.
Let's hear it.
Okay, let's say your body's cells are a locked room, and insulin is the key that opens the door to let the energy inside. So in type 1, you have doors, you have glucose waiting in the hallway to get in, but you just don't have any keys.
That is a very solid foundation, yes. In type 1, you have no keys. Now, how would you apply that to type 2?
Well, if type 2 isn't a lack of insulin, does that mean the locks are broken? Like, I have the keys, but they just aren't turning.
You're very close, but it's actually messier than just a broken lock.
Yeah.
In type 2 diabetes, you don't have a shortage of keys. In fact, you have an overwhelming surplus of keys.
Wait, really? Too much insulin?
Yes, the pancreas is working overtime, pumping out massive amounts of insulin. But the locks aren't just passively broken, they're actively resisting the keys. The cells are intentionally ignoring the insulin signal.
Why on earth would my own cells ignore the signal to take in energy?
Because they are already completely stuffed with energy.
Oh.
This is the concept of insulin resistance. The lock is jammed from the inside because the room is at maximum capacity.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
And because the lock is jammed, the glucose can't get into the cell. It backs up into the bloodstream, which gives you that high blood sugar reading on your lab test.
And I'm guessing the body doesn't just sit back and accept that.
Not at all. The body panics. The pancreas senses that the blood sugar is still high and assumes, oh, the doors aren't opening. We must not have enough keys.
So it makes more.
It pumps out even more insulin to try and force the issue. You end up in a state called hyperinsulinemia, which simply means chronically abnormally elevated insulin levels.
Hyperinsulinemia. Okay, got it. And this brings us to a concept Dr. Fung introduces called diabesity, which I assume is just a mashup of diabetes and obesity, right? Because you almost always see them together.
They're twin epidemics. Now, for decades, the conventional medical and nutritional view has relied on a very simple chain of causation.
Which is?
Eating too many calories causes weight gain, and then somehow carrying around that excess fat tissue causes diabetes. In that model, obesity is the primary driver, and diabetes is just sort of along for the ride.
But Fung says that's missing the actual driver. He argues that high insulin is the root cause of both the fat storage and the insulin resistance.
Exactly. And to understand why he makes that argument, we have to look at what insulin actually does from an evolutionary perspective.
Okay, let's do it.
We tend to view insulin merely as a blood sugar lowering tool, but biology doesn't care about our modern lab tests. Biologically, insulin is an energy storage hormone. That is its primary function.
So it's not just a regulator, it's a storage signal.
Yes. When you eat, your body breaks down that food into glucose. Blood sugar rises. Insulin is released to open the cellular locks so the glucose can be used for immediate energy.
That makes perfect sense. But I mean, I'm rarely eating the exact amount of energy my body needs in that exact split second.
Right, exactly. You eat a meal, and you generally have a massive surplus of energy. What does the body do with that surplus? It can't just let it float around.
It has to put it somewhere.
Insulin directs that surplus into storage. It takes the extra glucose and turns it into a substance called glycogen, which is stored in the liver and muscles for short-term energy.
Glycogen. Okay.
Think of glycogen like a refrigerator. It's easy to put food in, easy to take it out.
But a refrigerator only holds so much food.
Right. The glycogen storage tank is actually quite small. Once the liver and muscles are full, insulin initiates a secondary process called de novo lipogenesis.
De novo lipogenesis. Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me.
Sure. It's just Latin and Greek. De novo means from new, and lipogenesis means making fat.
Literally making new fat.
Exactly. Insulin takes the extra circulating sugar, converts it into fat molecules, and packs it away into your fat cells for long-term energy storage. If glycogen is the refrigerator, body fat is the deep freezer down in the basement. It holds a nearly infinite amount of energy, but it's much harder to access.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. Insulin isn't just managing sugar. Insulin is literally the hormonal signal that tells your body
Perfectly evolved store energy for winter signal.
That is mind-blowing.
And the flip side is just as important. When insulin levels drop like between meals, or when you are fasting, or when you are sleeping, the body senses that the energy abundance is over.
So it stops storing.
Right. The low insulin is a signal that says, okay, time to open the vaults. Only when insulin is low can the body access that deep freezer and start burning stored fat for energy.
Oh, wow. So if my insulin is constantly high, let's say I'm eating a diet full of foods that require a massive insulin response, and I'm snacking all day so the insulin never gets a chance to fall. My body is permanently locked in storage mode.
You've hit the exact mechanism of modern weight gain.
It makes so much sense when you put it like that.
If insulin is chronically elevated, the metabolic switch is essentially jammed in the store position. You biologically cannot burn stored body fat if insulin is high in your bloodstream.
Because the signal is wrong.
Exactly. Insulin blocks an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase, which is required to release fat from your fat cells. Your body simply won't allow the fat out. So you gain weight. That is the obesity side of diabetes.
And the diabetes side happens simultaneously.
Yes, because those same cells, which are constantly being bombarded by insulin and force-fed glucose hour after hour, year after year, eventually try to protect themselves from the toxicity.
So they push back.
They start actively resisting the signal. They jam the locks. So obesity didn't cause the diabetes. Chronically high insulin caused them both at the exact same time.
This is just wild to think about. I want to pause and talk about the actual damage this causes. Because I think a lot of people hear high blood sugar and it sounds like, I don't know, a mild chemistry imbalance.
Right, like maybe you just feel a little sleepy after a meal.
Exactly. But it's not just floating around harmlessly. How does high blood sugar actually lead to someone, losing a foot?
I'm really glad you brought this up because the systemic nature of the damage is staggering. Glucose is a highly reactive molecule.
Okay.
When you have chronically high levels of it circulating in your bloodstream, it doesn't just sit there. It starts aggressively binding to proteins and fats in your body without the need for any enzymes. This process is called glycation.
Glycation, what does that actually look like inside a blood vessel?
Well, have you ever caramelized onions or seen the browning on a piece of toasted bread?
Yeah, of course.
That is a form of glycation, specifically the Maillard reaction. It's sugars reacting with proteins under heat. Now imagine a slow-motion version of that happening inside your blood vessels.
Inside my veins. Oh, gross.
Yeah, the excess sugar literally starts coating your red blood cells. Normally, a red blood cell is incredibly supple and flexible. It has to bend and fold to squeeze through the microscopic capillaries at the ends of your toes or in your retinas.
Because capillaries are incredibly tiny, right? Just like one cell wide.
Exactly. But when those red blood cells become sugar-coated through glycation, they become stiff. They become sticky. They completely lose their flexibility.
They get stuck.
They get wedged in the capillaries. They create microscopic blockages. And when blood can't flow through a capillary, the tissue downstream gets no oxygen and it dies.
Wow.
This is exactly why diabetes is a whole-body disease of the vascular system.
It's all connected.
Completely.
Right.
When the microscopic blood vessels in your eyes get choked off, the retinal tissue dies, leading to blindness. When the delicate filtration capillaries in your kidneys get clogged, they fail, leading to dialysis.
And the amputation.
When the capillaries feeding your peripheral nerves die off, the nerves die causing neuropathy, which means you can't feel a cut on your foot. That cut gets infected, the tissue is essentially rots because there is no blood flow to heal it. And that is what leads to those horrific amputations.
It is structurally destroying the plumbing of the entire body. It's like rust accumulating inside a pipe until water just can't get through.
That is an excellent structural metaphor. High blood sugar is rusting your internal plumbing. So, going back to the doctor's office, when they give you a pill just to lower the visible blood sugar by forcing it into your tissues, they aren't stopping that systemic metabolic breakdown.
They're just hiding it.
They're just managing the optics on the lab report while the foundation of the house rots.
Which means we have to understand how that foundation is rotting. We have to look at the cellular root of the disease, specifically the mechanics of insulin resistance. You mentioned earlier that the cells jam the locks to protect themselves.
Yes.
Why do they need protection from energy? Isn't energy a good thing?
Energy is vital, obviously, but anything in vast excess becomes toxic.
Yes.
This is where Dr. Fung uses an analogy that I find incredibly useful for conceptualizing insulin resistance.
Oh, I love his analogies.
Imagine a subway car in Tokyo at rush hour.
Okay, I can picture that. It is completely packed, shoulder to shoulder.
Right. The subway car represents your body's cells. The people inside with the glucose molecules. The doors open at the station, and more people are trying to get in. But there's simply no physical room left.
So nobody can move.
Exactly. The people inside start pushing back against the doors. That pushing back is insulin resistance. The cells are already completely overloaded with glucose.
So what does traditional medicine do in this scenario?
Well, traditional medicine sees that the platform is crowded, which represents the high blood sugar, and decides to intervene. They hire one of those famous Tokyo subway pushers, a bouncer basically, to violently shove more people into the train car.
And the bouncer is the injected insulin, or, the medication that forces the pancreas to make more insulin.
Exactly. And it works, temporarily. The bouncer uses sheer force to cram a few more people in. The platform clears out a bit. The blood sugar drops. The doctor applauds.
But what happens at the next station?
The resistance gets stronger. The people inside are absolutely miserable. They brace themselves against the doors. They push back even harder.
Right, because they don't want anyone else coming in.
Exactly. The locks get more jammed. So the next time you eat, you need 2 bouncers to clear the platform. You need more medication, more insulin.
Becomes a vicious, just accelerating cycle.
It does. You eat a highly refined meal. That generates a massive amount of glucose. Your pancreas secretes a massive amount of insulin to deal with it. But your cells are full, so they resist.
And the blood sugar stays high.
Right. The pancreas panics and secretes even higher levels of insulin to force the doors open. You end up with both astronomically high blood sugar, A and D, astronomically high insulin.
And as this resistance builds systemically, there is one specific organ that takes the absolute brunt of the assault, right?
There is.
I'm going to guess it's the liver.
It is the liver. The liver is the body's central chemical processing plant and, honestly, traffic cop.
Okay.
When the muscle cells and the regular fat cells start heavily resisting insulin, the excess glucose backs up. The liver has to do something with it. As we mentioned with de novo lipogenesis, it frantically converts that glucose into fat.
Right, making you fat.
But because the system is so overwhelmed, it can't export that fat fast enough. It starts storing the fat right there inside the liver tissue itself.
Which leads to a fatty liver. I mean, I always associated fatty liver with alcoholism. I didn't realize food could do the exact same thing.
We now call it non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD.
Yeah.
And it is a complete metabolic disaster.
Really? Why is it so bad?
Because once the liver gets packed with fat, the liver itself becomes profoundly insulin resistant. And this breaks a critical bodily function.
What function?
Remember, one of the liver's main jobs is to release a slow, steady drip of stored glucose into the blood when you are fasting, like when you are asleep,
Yeah.
to keep your brain fueled.
Right, it's the backup generator kicking on during the night.
But when the liver is engorged with fat and profoundly insulin resistant, the hormonal signaling is completely scrambled. The liver basically goes deaf.
It can't hear the signal.
Exactly. It stops hearing the insulin signal, telling it to stop producing sugar. So the liver starts inappropriately releasing massive amounts of glucose into your bloodstream, even when you haven't eaten a single thing.
Wait, so that explains a phenomenon I've heard about. People with severe type 2 diabetes will go to bed fast for like 10 hours and wake up with blood sugar that is through the roof.
The dawn phenomenon, yeah.
I always wondered how that was physically possible if they didn't eat sugar. Their own liver is dumping it into their blood.
Exactly. Their liver is wildly overproducing glucose because the communication system has completely broken down due to the internal fat accumulation. It's just a physiological cascade of failure.
But, and I want to frame this carefully for everyone listening, because while everything we just described sounds borderline apocalyptic, Fung makes a philosophical point here that is incredibly empowering.
He does.
Your body isn't actually broken. It isn't a defective machine that just, gave up.
No, it is functioning perfectly to protect itself from a toxic overload.
That is a massive paradigm shift. My cells becoming insulin resistant isn't a failure of my genetics. It's a survival mechanism.
Think about it. If the cells just passively let all that sugar in without resisting, the cell would literally swell and die from the toxic accumulation.
Oh, wow.
The body is doing exactly what it evolved to do over millions of years of human history.
Huh.
We evolved in environments of scarcity, right? Where famine was a constant threat.
Right, our ancestors weren't hitting the drive-through.
Exactly. Your body is a machine designed to survive famine by ruthlessly storing every single ounce of excess energy it encounters. The problem isn't the machine.
The problem is the environment.
The problem is that we are operating a famine-adapted machine in a modern environment of non-stop hyper-processed feasting. The room isn't broken, the subway car isn't defective, it is just full.
It is simply full. Okay, so if we establish that the cells are stuffed and the liver is completely overwhelmed and packing itself with fat, my next obvious question is, how did the fat get there so quickly?
We have to look at the inputs.
Right, we have to look at exactly what is stuffing them. If I'm eating, say, a plate of pasta or a piece of fruit, how is that driving this epidemic?
This brings us to a microscopic look at the modern diet. Because not all foods, and specifically not all sugars, are created equal in the eyes of your metabolism.
See, I always thought sugar was just sugar. Calories in, calories out.
A lot of people still think that.
But Fung breaks down sugar into glucose and fructose and explains why they behave like two completely different molecules in the body.
It is a critical distinction that completely invalidates the simple calorie is a calorie model. Let's look at table sugar, or sucrose.
Okay, the white stuff in the sugar bowl.
Right. It is a double molecule consisting of roughly 50% glucose and 50% fructose. Now, glucose is the fundamental energy currency of life on Earth.
Right, we need it.
Every single cell in your body, from your brain to your muscles to your toes, has the biological machinery to use glucose for energy. When you consume glucose, it disperses throughout your entire body to be used.
It's democratic. Everyone gets a share of the energy.
Exactly. The burden of processing glucose is shared by your entire body mass. But fructose is completely different.
How so?
Almost no cell in your body can use fructose for energy directly. Only the liver has the specific enzymatic machinery required to metabolize fructose.
Wait, why is that? Why would we evolve a system where only one organ can handle it?
Evolutionarily, fructose was rare. It was only found in seasonal fruit, wrapped in massive amounts of fiber, or in honey, guarded by angry bees.
Right, you couldn't just get a big gulp of it.
We didn't need a whole body system to process it. The liver handled the small seasonal doses just fine. But fast forward to today. If you drink a massive 32-ounce soda sweetened with high fructose corn syrup,
Oh boy.
the glucose part gets dispersed. But the fructose part forms a targeted, massive, direct assault on the liver alone.
So 100% of the fructose payload bypasses the rest of the body and just hits the liver all at once.
Yes.
And what does the liver do with a sudden influx of energy that the rest of the body doesn't want and literally can't use?
It has only one option. It instantly converts it into fat.
Just instantly.
Instantly. Fructose is the most direct, efficient driver of fatty liver disease known to medical science. It doesn't even trigger the normal satiety hormones that tell your brain you are full.
So you can just keep drinking it.
You can consume hundreds of calories of liquid fructose and still feel absolutely ravenous. And as we just discussed, fatty liver is the primary engine of severe insulin resistance.
Wow.
This is why Dr. Fung so specifically targets sugary drinks, sodas, fruit juices, and high fructose sweeteners. They aren't just empty calories, they are a direct, targeted metabolic poison to the liver.
I want to focus on fruit juice for a second because it is wild how we've culturally normalized giving toddlers massive cups of apple juice every morning.
It is deeply concerning.
We think it's healthy because it comes from a fruit. We completely ignore the fact that we've stripped away all the natural fiber that slows down the absorption, and we're just hitting their tiny livers with a pure fructose bomb.
The biochemical reality of a glass of commercial apple juice is virtually indistinguishable from a glass of cola as far as your child's liver is concerned.
That is just so sad to think about. Okay, so that's sugar. We know sugar is bad. But Fung goes after refined carbohydrates just as aggressively.
He absolutely does.
And this challenges a lot of deeply held beliefs about, healthy whole grains. If I'm eating a piece of white bread or a bagel, is that biologically the same as eating a spoonful of sugar?
To your endocrine system, the difference is negligible.
Really? A bagel?
Yes. You have to understand what a refined carbohydrate actually is on a molecular level. Starch, which is what flour is made of, is essentially just a long chain of glucose molecules linked together.
Okay.
When you eat complex, unrefined carbohydrates like whole vegetables or legumes, those chains of glucose are locked inside tough cellular structures and wrapped in fiber.
So they take a while to break down.
It takes your digestive system a long time to mechanically and chemically break them down. The glucose enters your bloodstream very slowly.
Like a gentle rolling hill on a blood sugar graph.
Precisely. The insulin response is equally gentle. But when you refine a grain, when you take wheat, strip away the fibrous bran and the nutritious germ, and pulverize the endosperm into an ultrafine white powder to make flour.
You've basically done the stomach's job already.
Exactly. You have destroyed all that protective structure. You've pre-digested it mechanically.
So when I eat a bagel made of that ultrafine powder,
When that refined flour hits the saliva in your mouth, enzymes called amylase instantly begin shearing those chains of glucose apart. By the time it hits your stomach, it is essentially pure glucose. It requires almost no digestion.
so it's not a gentle hill anymore, it's just a vertical spike on the graph.
A massive, rapid spike in blood sugar, which triggers a massive, rapid, panic-induced spike in insulin from the pancreas.
And we know what that means.
Right. Remember what insulin does. It is the fat storage hormone. So you eat the bagel, insulin spikes massively. It forcefully shoves all that energy into your fat cells, and because there was so much insulin.
The blood sugar crashes.
Yes, your blood sugar crashes down below baseline.
And I know exactly what that crash feels like. When your blood sugar crashes, you get the shakes, you get brain fog, you feel like you are starving.
The classic hangry feeling.
Yes. You eat a massive bagel just 2 hours ago, but now you are ravenous and craving a donut.
Because your body just locked all the energy from the bagel away in the deep freezer of your fat cells, and the high insulin lingering in your blood prevents you from opening the freezer to get it back out.
That is incredibly frustrating.
You are quite literally gaining fat and starving on a cellular level at the exact same time.
That is a tragedy of biology, honestly, which leads perfectly into the second part of this dietary trap. And this is the part of the book that truly shocked me because it goes against everything I was taught about fitness.
The snacking myth.
The snacking myth. For decades, the prevailing advice in every fitness magazine was that you must eat 6 small meals a day to keep your metabolism stoked or, keep the metabolic fire burning.
It is arguably one of the most biologically destructive pieces of nutritional advice ever widely disseminated.
Wow, really?
Let's look at the actual mechanics of constant grazing through the lens of everything we've just learned about insulin. We have established 2 fundamental metabolic states for human beings.
The fed state and the fasted state.
Exactly. The fed state, when insulin is high and you are actively storing energy, and the fasted state, when insulin is low and you are actively burning stored energy.
You can only be in one state at a time. You are either storing or burning.
Correct. Now, let's map out the 6 meals a day protocol.
Mm-hmm.
You breakfast at 7 a.m. Your insulin spikes to handle the food.
Okay.
If you have a mid-morning snack at 10 a.m., you spike it again before it even had a chance to return to baseline.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Then you eat lunch at 1 p.m., another spike. An afternoon snack at 4 p.m. spike. Dinner at 7 p.m. spike. A late night snack while watching TV at 10 p.m. spike.
Your insulin is literally never given the chance to go down.
Never. If you are eating 6 times a day, your insulin is chronically, constantly elevated. You are perpetually locked in the fed storage state.
So you literally can't burn fat.
You are biologically prohibiting your body from ever tapping into its stored fat reserves. You are creating a state of chronic hyperinsulinemia just through the sheer frequency of your eating, even if those snacks are relatively healthy. Constant eating means constant insulin release.
Okay, this is a heavy realization. We've established that the cells are stuffed like a Tokyo subway car. The liver is fatty and broken. Fructose is a targeted weapon against the liver. Refined carbs act exactly like pure sugar spikes, and constantly snacking keeps the fat storage switch permanently taped in the on position.
It's a perfect storm.
It sounds incredibly bleak, but knowing exactly what drives the insulin spike tells us exactly how to reverse it, right?
That's the hopeful part, yes.
And there is a bizarre medical phenomenon that Fung points to as the ultimate clue for how to fix this without necessarily needing new drugs.
Ah, yes, the bariatric surgery anomaly. It is one of the most fascinating clinical observations in modern medicine.
This totally blew my mind. Let's dig into this. Bariatric surgery is weight loss surgery. They physically staple the stomach to make it smaller, or bypass a portion of the digestive tract.
Right.
The goal is to force morbidly obese patients to lose weight. But the observation is that patients with severe insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes who undergo this surgery often see their diabetes improve or completely vanish almost immediately.
That is the profound observation. And the timeline is the absolute key to understanding the mechanism here.
What do you mean by the timeline?
The diabetes doesn't gradually vanish a year later when they finally lost 100 pounds. The blood sugar normalizes in days or weeks.
Days.
Days. Long before they have lost any clinically significant amount of body fat, they often leave the hospital off all their diabetes medications.
Wait, really? Before they even lose the weight? which completely destroys the conventional view that the fat tissue causes the diabetes. Because they are still obese when they leave the hospital, the fat is still there,
It's still there.
but the diabetes is in remission. So why? What is the aha moment here? Why does their blood sugar normalize?
It normalizes because when a surgeon staples someone's stomach to the size of a walnut, they physically cannot eat.
Right.
Their food intake drops to almost absolute zero practically overnight. They might consume a few hundred calories of clear liquids.
And when food intake drops to zero,
Insulin drops. Immediately and precipitously. The bariatric surgery insight is the ultimate clinical proof of Fung's entire theory.
it's not the fat loss.
It's not the slow, eventual shedding of the subcutaneous fat mass that fixes the blood sugar. It's the immediate, drastic cessation of the insulin-spiking food.
You literally turned off the tap.
Exactly. The body senses the sudden, dramatic drop in insulin. It flips the metabolic switch from store to burn.
And starts clearing things out.
And crucially, the very first place it goes to burn fat is the liver. It starts rapidly clearing the toxic ectopic fat out of the liver and the pancreas.
That is amazing.
As the liver deflates and loses that fat, the insulin resistance begins to resolve rapidly. The communication network comes back online well before the scale shows massive weight loss.
That is just incredible. So bariatric surgery essentially forces a severe dietary pivot through physical restriction.
Right.
But Fung's argument is that we don't necessarily need surgical mutilation of our digestive tract to turn off the tap. We can achieve the exact same hormonal response through a deliberate nutritional pivot.
Exactly.
We just have to stop eating the specific macronutrients that heavily spike insulin.
We use the bariatric clue to reverse engineer a dietary protocol. If lowering insulin is the ultimate biological goal, we must structure our nutrition to minimize insulin exposure.
Which means reducing the refined carbs and sugar, obviously. But what do we replace them with? Because if you take away bread and pasta, people are going to be really hungry.
They are.
This is where Fung rehabilitates a macronutrient that was absolutely demonized for half a century: natural fats.
The history of dietary fat in the late 20th century is a fascinating study in scientific misdirection and epidemiological hubris.
It really is.
In the 1970s and 80s, based on very flawed observational studies, the public was told that dietary fat makes you fat and causes heart disease. We were urged to shift to low-fat diets.
I remember this, the era of the Snackwell's fat-free cookies.
Exactly.
Everything was fat-free, but loaded with sugar to make it taste good.
Precisely. To make low-fat food palatable, because fat is what gives food flavor and texture, the food industry pumped it full of sugar and refined carbohydrates.
Yeah.
We traded fat for sugar on a societal scale.
And we all got fatter and sicker.
We did. But let's look at dietary fat through our new insulin lens. When you eat pure sugar or a refined carbohydrate, you get a massive insulin spike.
Right.
When you eat protein, you get a moderate insulin spike.
Yeah.
But when you eat pure, natural fat like olive oil, butter, avocado, or the fat naturally occurring in a piece of meat, what happens to your insulin?
I would assume it spikes because it's so calorie dense. Like a tablespoon of olive oil is a lot of calories.
It sounds paradoxical based on calorie counts, but biochemically, the insulin response to pure fat is incredibly small. It is almost flat.
Wait, really? Eating fat barely triggers the fat storage hormone.
It is biochemically true. Dietary fat does not significantly stimulate the secretion of insulin from the pancreas.
Oh, wow.
It also digests very slowly, keeping you satiated for hours. Therefore, a diet high in healthy natural fats and very low in refined carbohydrates allows you to consume adequate daily energy without triggering the hormonal cascade that locks you into storage mode.
That makes total sense. So pouring olive oil on a salad, eating an avocado, snacking on nuts, eating whole eggs instead of just egg whites, enjoying fatty fill like salmon, these are the actual tools to keep the insulin baseline low while staying full.
Exactly. They're essential tools.
But what about protein? Because you mentioned it causes a moderate spike. I know a lot of people think if low carb is good, then a pure meat, zero carb, insanely high protein diet must be the ultimate hack.
Fung provides a very necessary nuance here. Protein is absolutely essential for human life. You need it for maintaining muscle mass, for cellular repair, for creating enzymes and hormones, but it must be moderated. If you consume vast excesses of lean protein beyond what your body actively needs for repair and maintenance, your body cannot store extra protein as protein.
So what does it do with it?
Your liver will take those extra amino acids and convert them into glucose through a biologic process called gluconeogenesis.
Gluconeogenesis, making new sugar out of protein.
Exactly. It's an energy-intensive process, but the liver will do it. So an endlessly high-protein diet, if it's too high, can still end up slowly elevating your blood sugar and your insulin over time, albeit much slower than eating a bagel.
Right, okay.
The goal Fung outlines is balance. Adequate, moderate protein, high amounts of natural fats, and fibers above ground vegetables that slow down digestion and provide nutrients without spiking insulin.
Let me ask you this, because we haven't really touched on the fitness industry's absolute favorite word, exercise. I can hear people yelling at their speakers right now, why change my diet? Just go for a run, burn it off. What is the actual relationship between diet and exercise when it comes to reversing insulin resistance?
We must be very precise here. Exercise is undeniably excellent for your overall health. It strengthens your cardiovascular system, improves bone density, builds muscle, and is phenomenal for mental well-being.
Absolutely.
And regarding diabetes specifically, exercise does improve insulin sensitivity.
Okay, how does it do that?
When you actively contract a muscle during exercise, that muscle requires immediate energy. The muscle contraction itself can actually pull circulating glucose out of the blood without needing as much insulin to open the door.
Really?
Yes. It essentially creates a side door for the glucose to enter the muscle.
That sounds like exactly what we want.
It is beneficial. But here is the critical distinction that Fung makes. Exercise improves insulin sensitivity, but your diet determines your total insulin exposure.
Exposure versus sensitivity. Expand on that for a second.
You cannot outrun a fundamentally bad diet. If you run on a treadmill for an hour, you might improve your muscle sensitivity slightly.
Okay.
But if you then go consume a massive 40-ounce soda and a huge plate of pasta, you're still flooding the entire systemic with massive amounts of glucose and triggering a tidal wave of insulin.
You're leaving the tap on.
Exactly, leaving the tap on. Exercise helps drain the sink slightly faster, but diet is the absolute only way to turn off the tap.
Diet determines exposure. That is a fantastic way to remember it. Okay, so we've mapped out the dietary pivot. Low carb, moderate protein, high healthy fats.
Right.
But if radically reducing food intake, like in bariatric surgery, is the fastest, most dramatic way to drop insulin and clear out the fatty liver,
Great.
can we achieve that rapid metabolic reset without having surgery?
We can.
This brings us to what is undoubtedly Dr. Fung's most famous and probably most heavily debated tool, intermittent fasting.
Fasting is the logical, biological conclusion of his entire framework. If the constant consumption of food keeps insulin high, then the deliberate absence of food must be the most powerful, direct way to bring it down.
Fasting. Just deliberately not eating for a specific period of time. I mean, it sounds so ancient, almost biblical,
It is ancient. Humans have been fasting for thousands of years.
But when you look at it through the lens of everything we've just discussed about insulin and storage, it possesses a sort of brutal elegance. We are just giving the body time to empty the room.
That is precisely the biological mechanism at play. When you enter a true fasted state, meaning you are consuming absolutely 0 calories, drinking only water or black coffee or plain tea, your insulin levels are finally allowed to plummet to their absolute baseline.
And remember, insulin is the lock on the energy vault.
Exactly. When insulin drops, the vault finally opens.
The body flips the switch from store to burn.
Yes. The body realizes there is no incoming energy from the digestive tract, but it still needs a constant supply of fuel to keep your heart beating, your lungs breathing, and your brain running.
It has to get it from somewhere.
So what does it do? It first burns through the stored glycogen in the liver. It empties the refrigerator.
Okay.
Once that glycogen is depleted, usually after 12 to 24 hours of fasting, the body shifts entirely to burning stored body fat. It opens the deep freezer.
And crucially, for someone trying to reverse diabetes, where does it pull that fat from first?
It targets the ectopic fat. It starts burning away the toxic fat stored inside the liver and the pancreas. It literally starts clearing out the internal organs.
It's cleaning house. It's taking all that excess luggage that was violently shoved into the subway car over the years and just finally tossing it out the window.
Biochemically prolonged fasting is arguably the most efficient, rapid way to reduce profound insulin resistance. You are forcing the body to consume its own internal toxic energy reserves.
That's amazing.
It also triggers cellular repair processes like autophagy, where the body breaks down old, damaged cellular components.
I am utterly fascinated by the mechanics of this, but I need to hit a massive flashing red pause button here.
Very wise.
I love exploring these concepts, but I also want to make sure everyone listening stays safe. We are talking about fundamentally altering your body's deeply entrenched energy chemistry.
Yes, we are.
We have to be crystal clear here. If someone is listening to this, they cannot just throw their diabetes medication in the trash and decide to stop eating for 3 days without a doctor involved.
Absolutely not. That is a critical safety warning that simply cannot be overstated. And to his credit, Dr. Fung emphasizes this heavily in his clinical practice and in the text.
Okay, yeah.
This brings us to the very real dangers and the debates surrounding these protocols within the broader medical community.
Let's unpack that debate, because I know Fung has his detractors and fasting is controversial. What is the immediate physical danger here for a diabetic patient?
The immediate, potentially fatal danger is severe hypoglycemia, dangerously critically low blood sugar.
Okay.
If you are a type 2 diabetic on medication, especially if you are injecting exogenous insulin or taking classes of drugs like sulfonylureas that artificially force your pancreas to pump out more insulin, those drugs are actively driving your blood sugar down.
And the drugs don't know you stopped eating.
They do not. If you combine those aggressive blood sugar lowering drugs with a fasting protocol that naturally drives your blood sugar down,
They compound each other, the floor just completely drops out.
yes, and your blood sugar can crash to fatal levels. Your brain requires a baseline level of glucose to function.
Mhm.
If it drops too low, you become confused, you pass out, you can go into a coma, and you can die.
Wow.
Fasting, while heavily medicated for diabetes, is like driving a car with the accelerator stuck to the floor and slamming on the emergency brake at the exact same time. The system violently crashes.
That is a terrifying visual.
This is exactly why fasting regimens, especially for diabetics, absolutely require strict, individualized medical supervision. A doctor must actively deprescribe and adjust medications dynamically as the diet changes and insulin sensitivity improves.
Thank you for laying that out so clearly. Safety first, always.
Always.
But aside from the immediate danger of doing it unsupervised, what is the broader medical pushback against Fung's ideas? Has the establishment come around to this reversing diabetes concept, or is this still considered, fringe?
It is evolving, but there is still vigorous debate. For decades, the idea that type 2 diabetes was reversible in any capacity was considered medical heresy.
Really? Heresy?
Yes, it was viewed strictly as a one-way street of progressive decline. Fung's assertion that you can achieve remission, that you can empty the room and turn off the tap, is gaining traction, but the absolute permanence of it is debated.
What do you mean by permanence?
Many endocrinologists prefer the term remission rather than cure, because if you use fasting and low-carb diets to reverse your insulin resistance, your blood sugar normalizes. You might get off all medications.
Which sounds like a cure.
It does. But you haven't genetically mutated into a person who can suddenly eat endless donuts and drink daily sodas without consequence.
Right. You've emptied the sink, but the plumbing is the same. If you turn the toxic tap back on, it just overflows again.
Exactly. The underlying metabolic tendency remains. Furthermore, the medical community rightly points out that while fasting and strict low-carb diets are powerful physiological tools, they are not universally sustainable for everyone psychologically, culturally, or socially.
Food is deeply tied to human connection.
It is.
I mean, it's hard to go to a birthday party or a family dinner and just sit there drinking black coffee while everyone else eats cake.
It is very difficult. And modern diabetes care guidelines reflect this nuance. They have shifted significantly. Mainstream guidelines now heavily support substantial weight loss and carbohydrate reduction as primary frontline goals.
That's a good shift.
It is. But they also recognize that medications are still a vital, evidence-based part of modern care for those who cannot or will not drastically alter their lifestyle.
Right.
Furthermore, newer classes of drugs like GLP-1 agonists focus on different metabolic pathways rather than just blindly forcing more insulin into the system. And they are showing incredible results for weight loss and cardiovascular protection.
So the takeaway isn't all modern medicine is evil. It's about using the right tools, understanding the actual root cause, and aiming for physiological healing rather than just blindly mopping the floor for the rest of your life.
Precisely. It must be an individualized approach between a patient and a progressive doctor. But Fung's lasting contribution to the field is shifting the philosophical baseline.
He started a major conversation.
He demands that we look at hyperinsulinemia as the root of the rot, and he forces the medical community to acknowledge that targeted dietary intervention is not just a cute accessory to medication, but is often the primary, most powerful physiological cure.
This has been an incredible journey. We have gone from the macro scale of a global society-wide epidemic all the way down to the microscopic insulin locks on your cells and the rusty pipes of your vascular system.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. Let's summarize the core revelations of this deep dive into the diabetes code. We started with a fundamental ground-up redefinition. Type 2 diabetes is not simply a disease of high blood sugar.
Right.
That is merely the symptom, the smoke. It is a metabolic disease of profound insulin resistance caused by your cells desperately trying to protect themselves from a toxic, relentless overload of energy.
That is the crucial summary. The key takeaway is that lowering your insulin levels, not just sweeping blood sugar under the rug with extra insulin, is the true biological path to healing.
And we mapped out a practical action plan based on these mechanics. First and foremost, eliminate sugary drinks. They are a direct, unmitigated biological assault on your liver. Greatly reduce your intake of refined carbohydrates. Treat them essentially as you would treat eating pure sugar. Base your meals on whole, minimally processed foods, adequate protein, and healthy natural fats.
And stop the endless grazing. If you take away nothing else, break the snacking trap. Give your body a chance to flip the switch from storing fat to burning fat.
Yes, close the kitchen.
Aim for sustainable weight loss, recognizing that reducing that toxic visceral fat around your liver is what actually unjams the cellular locks. Exercise regularly to keep your muscles sensitive to whatever insulin is present in your blood.
And crucially, as we just discussed at length, you must consult your healthcare team before making major changes, especially if you are considering intermittent fasting or if you are currently on any glucose-lowering medications.
Cannot stress that enough.
I think the most beautiful thing about looking at metabolism this way is that it completely changes how you view a plate of food. It's not about agonizing over calorie counting anymore.
It's really not.
It's not about morality or a lack of willpower or feeling like a failure. It is pure, understandable biology. Armed with this knowledge, you can look at your daily choices as a way to control your body's hormonal storage switch.
You have the power to reach over and turn off the tap.
Prevention is infinitely easier than treatment, but treatment and true remission are entirely possible.
It is deeply empowering for the individual. But I want to leave you with a final thought, something that wasn't explicitly covered in our summary, but naturally flows from understanding the evolutionary science we discussed today.
Ooh, I love a good final thought. Let's hear it.
We have spent an hour discussing how the individual can navigate this landscape. But let's zoom out one last time. If type 2 diabetes is essentially a perfectly normal, predictable, survival-based biological response to an entirely abnormal, highly processed modern food environment,
A famine-adapted machine operating in a toxic landscape of endless processed feasting.
yes, then perhaps the ultimate cure isn't just treating the individual. It isn't just asking millions of people to fight an exhausting uphill battle against their own perfectly evolved biochemistry every single time they walk into a grocery store.
Right.
Perhaps the real imperative is demanding a fundamental restructuring of the food industry itself and how we feed our society as a whole.
Wow. That puts the responsibility on a totally different level.
Because if we look closely at the overflowing sink and we understand how the tap was turned on in the first place, we have to realize a hard truth.
Which is?
We aren't failing our environment through a lack of willpower. Our modern environment is failing our ancient biology.
That is a thought that is going to linger with me the next time I walk down a supermarket aisle. And next time you are sitting in that doctor's office looking at that clipboard, remember,
Right.
you are not just a broken machine. You are a biological marvel responding exactly as you were designed to.
Perfectly said.
The question is, what kind of environment are you going to build for yourself to let that machine heal? Thanks for joining us in the deep end. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to Explainivo. See you in the next video.